The autumn morning broke cold over Portland, Oregon, casting long shadows across the campus of Reed College. Students hurried between classes, their breath visible in the October air, scarves wrapped tight against the wind that swept down from Mount Hood. Among them, 20-year-old Rebecca Martinez should have been rushing to her modern American literature seminar. Instead, her dorm room sat undisturbed, her backpack still hanging on the chair where she'd left it the night before. Rebecca's roommate, Jennifer Kim, discovered the absence first. The bed hadn't been slept in, which wasn't entirely unusual. Rebecca sometimes stayed late at the library or crashed at a friend's place after study sessions. But when Jennifer checked her phone and saw no messages, a small knot of worry began to form in her stomach. Rebecca always texted, always. By noon, that worry had spread through their friend circle like wildfire. Nobody had seen Rebecca since the night before, when she'd left the campus coffee shop around 9 o'clock, telling her study group she needed to make a quick phone call before heading back to finish an essay. That call, they would later learn, had lasted 7 minutes. After that, Rebecca Martinez vanished into the Portland night as completely as if she'd never existed. If you're watching this story unfold, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. These real stories matter, and your engagement helps us share them with the world. The Portland Police Department opened a missing persons investigation within 24 hours, which was unusually fast. Rebecca's mother, Gloria Martinez, had driven up from Sacramento the moment Jennifer called her, and she'd arrived at the police station with photographs, medical records, and a mother's absolute certainty that something was terribly wrong. Her daughter wouldn't just disappear, not Rebecca, who called home every Sunday without fail, who'd worked 3 jobs to save money for college, who'd been the first in their family to pursue a university degree. Detective Frank Walsh, a 20-year veteran with the Portland PD, took the case seriously from the start. Something about Gloria's desperate eyes reminded him of his own daughter, and he threw himself into the investigation with unusual intensity. They pulled security footage from every camera within a 2-mile radius of campus. They interviewed dozens of students, professors, and local residents. They traced Rebecca's phone records, her bank accounts, her social media activity. The phone record showed that last call had been to a number registered to a prepaid cell phone, purchased with cash at a convenience store in Gresham 2 weeks earlier. The call had pinged off a tower near the campus. After that, both phones went dark. Rebecca's powered off completely, the unknown number never used again. Her bank account showed no activity after a small coffee purchase at 6:47 p.m. on the day she disappeared. Her social media accounts remained frozen in time. Her last post, a shared article about climate change, with the caption, "We have to do better." Her car, a 2003 Honda Civic her mother had helped her buy, sat undisturbed in the student parking lot, a parking ticket tucked under the wiper from 2 days after her disappearance. Detective Walsh organized search parties that combed through Forest Park, the massive urban wilderness that bordered the western edge of the city. Hundreds of volunteers, mostly students from Reed and other local colleges, spent weeks searching through dense undergrowth and along the trails that wound through the park's 5,000 acres. They found nothing. No clothing, no phone, no sign that Rebecca had ever been there. The investigation expanded. Walsh looked into every person Rebecca had contacted in the weeks before her disappearance. Her ex-boyfriend from high school, now attending college in Seattle, had an airtight alibi. A teaching assistant she'd gotten into a heated debate with over a grade was home with the flu, confirmed by medical records and roommates. Every lead dissolved into nothing. 3 months after Rebecca's disappearance, the FBI joined the investigation. Special Agent Linda Torres, who specialized in missing persons cases, brought fresh eyes and federal resources. They expanded the search nationwide, looking at similar disappearances in other college towns, checking databases for Jane Does that matched Rebecca's description. Torres was methodical and thorough, but even with the FBI's resources, the case grew cold. Gloria Martinez never stopped searching. She took a leave of absence from her job as a dental hygienist and moved to Portland, renting a small apartment near campus. She created flyers with Rebecca's photo, her daughter's warm brown eyes, her bright smile, the small scar above her left eyebrow from a childhood bicycle accident. Gloria plastered these flyers on every surface that would hold them, handed them out on street corners, organized candlelight vigils on the anniversary of Rebecca's disappearance. The first year passed, then the second. The media attention that had initially blazed bright gradually faded to occasional updates. Detective Walsh retired in 2013, but before he left, he spent an afternoon with Gloria in her cramped apartment, promising her that someone would always be working Rebecca's case, that she wouldn't be forgotten. He kept his word, passing detailed notes and his personal insights to Detective Amanda Price, who inherited the case along with dozens of others. Price was younger than Walsh, early 30s, with a reputation for being tech-savvy and persistent. She reviewed everything, every interview, every piece of evidence, every dead-end lead. She created digital timelines, mapped out Rebecca's last known movements on sophisticated software, re-interviewed key witnesses. But despite her dedication, the case remained frozen, a mystery without answers. By 2015, the investigation had essentially stalled. Gloria still lived in Portland, still distributed flyers, still called Detective Price every few weeks, asking for updates that Price couldn't provide. Rebecca's friends had graduated, moved away, started careers and families. The dorm room she'd shared with Jennifer Kim housed new students who knew nothing of the girl who'd once lived there. Life moved on, indifferent to one family's anguish. Rebecca's younger brother Daniel struggled through his own college years, haunted by his sister's absence. He'd been 15 when she disappeared, a freshman in high school. The uncertainty gnawed at him in ways that a confirmed death might not have. He couldn't grieve properly because some part of him insisted she might still be alive. He couldn't move forward because how could he when Rebecca was frozen at age 20, somewhere out there, or nowhere at all? The Martinez family began to fracture under the weight of not knowing. Gloria's marriage to Rebecca's father, Antonio, crumbled in 2016. He'd never stopped loving his daughter, but he couldn't live in the shrine Gloria had made of their lives, couldn't spend every waking moment searching for someone who might never be found. He moved back to California, and though they never divorced, they stopped being husband and wife in any meaningful sense. Detective Price continued working the case when she could, but cold cases demanded time she didn't have as newer investigations piled up. She'd reach out to Gloria on the anniversary of Rebecca's disappearance, assure her the case remained open, promise to call if anything new developed. But nothing ever did. In 2018, Daniel Martinez graduated from UCLA with a degree in computer science. During his studies, he'd become fascinated with emerging technologies, particularly facial recognition software. He understood its limitations, its biases, its potential for abuse. But he also saw its potential for finding people who didn't want to be found, or who couldn't tell anyone where they were. He couldn't shake the idea that somewhere, in the vast digital expanse of social media, surveillance cameras, and online databases, his sister's face might appear. Maybe she'd been taken, was being held somewhere. Maybe she'd had some kind of breakdown, was living under a bridge or in a shelter, unable to remember who she was. Maybe, and this was the thought that kept him up at night, maybe she'd left voluntarily and built a new life, though he couldn't imagine why she would. Daniel began to teach himself everything he could about facial recognition technology. He studied academic papers, attended conferences, networked with researchers working on the cutting edge of computer vision and artificial intelligence. He learned about the massive databases that law enforcement and private companies maintained, filled with billions of images scraped from the internet, security footage, and public records. In 2019, he approached Detective Price with a proposal. He wanted to run Rebecca's photo through every facial recognition database he could access, comparing her face against images from across the country. Price was skeptical at first. The technology was promising but imperfect, prone to false positives, especially when searching for someone who'd been missing for nearly a decade. But she saw the determination in Daniel's eyes, the same desperate hope she'd seen in Gloria's for years, and she agreed to help however she could. Daniel created a comprehensive digital profile of Rebecca, using every photo the family had, every angle of her face, accounting for how aging might have changed her features. He wrote algorithms that could process millions of images, looking for matches within certain probability thresholds. He reached out to companies that operated facial recognition systems, explaining his sister's case, asking for their help. Most companies refused, citing privacy concerns or company policy, but a few, moved by the story or intrigued by the technical challenge, agreed to run searches through their databases. The first year of searching produced hundreds of false positives, women who resembled Rebecca but clearly weren't her. Each false lead was a small death, hope rising and crashing in the span of a phone call or email. Gloria, initially excited by Daniel's project, grew weary of the emotional whiplash. Every time he called, saying he had a potential match, she'd feel her heart leap, only to have it shattered when the lead proved false. She began to wonder if not knowing might be easier than this constant cycle of hope and despair, but she never asked Daniel to stop. How could she? He was doing what she'd done for years, refusing to give up, refusing to let Rebecca be forgotten. By 2023, facial recognition technology had advanced significantly. The algorithms were more sophisticated, the databases more comprehensive, the processing power exponentially greater. Daniel had also grown more skilled, refining his search parameters, improving his code, learning to filter out likely false positives before they reached his mother. In March of 2024, nearly 14 years after Rebecca disappeared, Daniel's system flagged a match in Austin, Texas. The image came from a database maintained by a private security company that operated surveillance systems for businesses across the Southwest. The footage was from a grocery store camera captured 3 weeks earlier. The woman in the image was in her mid-30s, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, her face slightly fuller than Rebecca's had been at 20. But the bone structure was right. The set of the eyes was right. That small scar above the left eyebrow was there. Daniel's hands shook as he ran the image through his verification protocols. The probability match came back at 87. 3%, the highest he'd ever seen for a genuine potential match. He ran it again using different algorithms, different parameters. 89, 1%. He enhanced the image, focusing on identifying features. The more he looked, the more certain he became. This was his sister. He called Detective Price at 2:47 a.m., too excited to wait for morning. Price, jolted awake by the call, listened as Daniel walked her through the match, the technical details, the probability scores. She was cautious. She'd seen too many false hopes in this case, but she couldn't deny the evidence he was presenting. She told him she'd contact the Austin Police Department first thing in the morning, request their assistance in locating the woman in the image. Daniel didn't sleep that night. Instead, he drove to his mother's apartment, arriving just as dawn broke over Portland. Gloria opened the door in her bathrobe, alarmed to see her son on her doorstep at such an hour. When he told her what he'd found, she didn't allow herself to believe it. couldn't allow herself to believe it. She'd been hurt too many times. But Daniel showed her the images, walked her through the analysis, and slowly, carefully, Gloria let hope kindle again in her chest. Detective Price worked quickly. By noon, she'd coordinated with the Austin Police Department, shared the surveillance footage, and Rebecca's information. The Austin PD agreed to investigate discreetly. They identified the grocery store, pulled additional footage, tracked the woman as she left the store, and got into a silver Toyota Camry. They ran the license plate. The car was registered to an Emma Victoria Hayes, 34 years old, residing at an address in a quiet neighborhood east of downtown Austin. Driver's license records showed a woman who bore a striking resemblance to the surveillance footage. According to Texas records, Emma Hayes had first appeared in the system in late 2010, applying for a driver's license with a California birth certificate and Social Security card. She'd held various jobs, retail, food service, eventually working her way up to a position as an office manager at a small architecture firm. Detective Price felt her pulse quicken as she reviewed the information. Emma Hayes had materialized in Texas just weeks after Rebecca Martinez disappeared in Oregon. The birth certificate and Social Security card were real documents, but Price's instincts, honed over years of investigation, told her something was off. She contacted the Social Security Administration, requesting a full history of the Social Security number Emma Hayes had used. What came back confirmed her suspicions. The number belonged to Emma Victoria Hayes, who'd been born in San Diego in 1990, but who had died in a car accident in 2008 at age 18. Someone had stolen a dead woman's identity. The pieces were falling into place, but Price knew they had to move carefully. If this was Rebecca Martinez, they needed to understand why she'd disappeared, why she was living under a false identity. If she'd left voluntarily, she was an adult with the right to live her life as she chose. But the circumstances of her disappearance, the sudden phone call, the abandoned belongings, the complete silence, suggested something more complex. Price flew to Austin, bringing Rebecca's dental records and DNA samples from Gloria. The Austin PD assigned Detective Marcus Thompson to assist. Together, they developed a plan. Thompson would approach Emma Hayes at her workplace, request a conversation about a routine matter. If she was indeed Rebecca Martinez, they'd know soon enough. On a warm April afternoon, Detective Thompson walked into the small architecture firm where Emma Hayes worked. The receptionist, a young man with thick-rimmed glasses, directed him to Emma's office. Thompson knocked, his heart beating faster than he'd like to admit. "Come in," a voice called. Thompson opened the door. Behind a desk, cluttered with files and a computer monitor, sat a woman in her mid-30s, her dark hair shorter than in the surveillance footage, professional clothes replacing the casual wear from the grocery store. She looked up with a polite smile that froze the moment she saw his badge. "Emma Hayes?" Thompson asked, though he already knew the answer. The woman's face went through a series of expressions in rapid succession: surprise, fear, calculation, and finally something that looked like resignation. For a long moment, she said nothing, and Thompson could see her mind working, trying to figure out how much he knew, what he wanted. "Yes," she finally said, her voice steady despite the tension in her shoulders. "How can I help you?" Thompson took a seat without being invited, a deliberate power move. "I'm Detective Marcus Thompson with the Austin Police Department. I'm working with authorities from Portland, Oregon, on a matter related to a missing persons case from 2010. Emma's knuckles went white as she gripped the edge of her desk. "I don't know anything about Portland," she said, but her voice cracked slightly on the city's name. "Ma'am, I think you do," Thompson said gently. "I think you know quite a bit about Portland, specifically about Reed College, about a young woman named Rebecca Martinez who disappeared on October 23rd, 2010. Emma closed her eyes. When she opened them again, tears had begun to form. "I didn't mean for it to happen this way," she whispered. "Why don't you tell me how it did happen?" Thompson suggested, his voice kind rather than accusatory. Emma, or Rebecca, as Thompson was now certain she was, stood and closed the office door. She returned to her desk but didn't sit, instead moving to the window that overlooked a small courtyard. For several minutes she simply stood there, shoulders trembling slightly. Thompson waited, patient. "My name is Rebecca Martinez," she finally said, her back still to him. "I disappeared from Portland 14 years ago. I've been Emma Hayes ever since." Thompson pulled out his phone and sent a quick text to Detective Price. "It's her." Then he waited for Rebecca to continue. "I was in trouble," Rebecca said, turning to face him. "Real trouble. The kind that doesn't go away, that follows you forever if you let it." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "There was a man. I met him online through a forum about environmental activism. We talked for months. He seemed smart, passionate about the same issues I cared about. He said he was organizing a group taking direct action against corporations destroying the planet." She sat down heavily in her chair. "He wanted to meet. Said he was going to be in Portland, asked if I'd be interested in hearing more about the group's work. I was 20 years old and thought I could change the world. I was an idiot." "What happened when you met him?" Thompson asked. "We didn't meet. Not exactly. I went to where he told me to go, a coffee shop downtown, but he called instead, said there'd been a change of plans, that someone had been following him, that it wasn't safe. He sounded paranoid, scared. He asked me to come to a different location, somewhere more private where we could talk safely." Rebecca's hands were shaking now. "I should have known better. I'd had a bad feeling all evening, but I ignored it. I wanted so badly to be part of something meaningful, something bigger than term papers and lectures." "Where did he ask you to meet him?" Thompson prompted when she fell silent. "An industrial area near the river. Warehouses mostly abandoned. I remember driving there, thinking how stupid I was being, but also thinking maybe I was being paranoid, that he really was just cautious about security. I got out of my car, and that's when I saw him. Except there were 3 of them, not one. 3 men emerging from between buildings." She wrapped her arms around herself. "I ran, got back to my car, locked the doors. They didn't chase me, just stood there watching. One of them was filming with a phone. That scared me more than anything. Why were they filming? I drove away, my heart pounding so hard I thought I'd pass out." "Why didn't you go to the police?" Thompson asked. Rebecca laughed bitterly. "I did. I went straight to a police station. But when I tried to explain, when I started talking about anonymous online contacts and environmental activism groups and meeting someone in an abandoned industrial area, I could see what the officer was thinking, that I was some naive college kid who'd almost gotten herself into a bad situation but was fine now. He took a report, told me to be more careful about who I talked to online, and that was it." "What happened next?" "I went back to campus. Tried to pretend everything was normal. But that night, I got an email. From him. It had photos attached, photos of me walking to class, in the campus coffee shop, outside my dorm. He'd been watching me for weeks, maybe months. The email said if I contacted the police again, if I told anyone about our conversation or the meeting, he'd release information that would destroy my family." Thompson leaned forward. "What information?" Rebecca's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "My father. He came to this country illegally when he was 17. He'd built a life, had a family, paid taxes, never committed a crime. But he wasn't documented. This man somehow knew that. He said one phone call and my father would be deported, my family torn apart. He said he had connections with ICE, that he could make it happen. So you ran, Thompson said, understanding. So I ran, Rebecca confirmed. I'd already been terrified, but this made it worse. He knew where I lived, where my family lived. He'd been watching me for months without me knowing. I didn't trust the police to protect me or my family. I thought if I disappeared, if he couldn't find me, maybe he'd leave my family alone. Why didn't you tell your family what was happening? Because they would have tried to stop me. My mother would have insisted I go to the police, trust the system. But I knew in my bones that the system wouldn't protect my father. He was undocumented, which meant he was vulnerable. One call to ICE, and everything we'd built would collapse. Rebecca wiped her eyes. I withdrew my entire savings account, about $2,000 I'd saved from summer jobs. I'd been researching how to disappear, had been looking into it for days. I found someone online who sold documents, driver's licenses, social security cards. It was easier than you'd think. I bought Emma Hayes' identity for $800. Emma Hayes was a real person, Thompson noted. I know, Rebecca said quietly, a girl who died young. I told myself I was honoring her by keeping her name alive, but really, I was just stealing from the dead. I'm not proud of it. How did you get to Texas? I took a bus. Portland to Sacramento, Sacramento to Phoenix, Phoenix to Austin. I paid cash for everything. When I got here, I found a shelter that helped people get on their feet. I lied, said I was running from an abusive boyfriend. They helped me find a job, a place to live. I started over. Thompson let the silence stretch, giving her time. Finally, he asked, "And you never contacted your family? Your mother searched for you for 14 years. Fresh tears spilled down Rebecca's cheeks. I know. God, I know. That's the part that haunts me every single day. But every time I thought about calling, I'd remember that email, those threats. I thought if I contacted them, he'd find out somehow, and he'd follow through. I was protecting them the only way I knew how. Did he ever contact you again?" "No. After I left Portland, nothing. No emails, no calls, nothing. For years, I waited for him to find me, to show up one day and destroy the life I'd built. But he never did. I sometimes wonder if the whole thing was real or if I overreacted, if I destroyed my family for nothing." "It was real," Thompson said firmly. "People who stalk others online, who use fear and threats to control them, they're very real. You were 20 years old and terrified. You did what you thought you had to do to survive." Rebecca's shoulders shook with sobs. "I thought about them every day. Birthdays, holidays, random Tuesday afternoons. I'd see mothers and daughters together and have to leave wherever I was because I couldn't stop crying. I built a life here, made friends, found meaningful work, but it was all hollow because I couldn't share it with the people I loved." "Rebecca," Thompson said gently, "your mother never stopped looking for you. Your brother developed facial recognition software specifically to find you. They never gave up." Rebecca looked up, stunned. "Daniel, my little brother?" "He's not so little anymore. He's 29 now, a computer scientist. He's the one who found you." Rebecca stood abruptly, pacing the small office. "How? How did he find me after all this time?" Thompson explained the facial recognition project, the years of searching, the match that had finally brought them to her door. As he talked, he watched Rebecca's face cycle through emotions: amazement, pride, fear, desperate hope. "Are they here?" she asked suddenly. "My mother, Daniel." "Your mother is in Portland. She's been notified that we found you, but we wanted to talk to you first, understand the situation before bringing your family into it." "I want to see them," Rebecca said, her voice urgent. "I've wasted so much time, 14 years. I can't waste another day." There are things we need to address first, Thompson said carefully. You've been living under a false identity, which is technically illegal, and we need to investigate the man who threatened you. Rebecca's expression hardened. I'll tell you everything I remember, every detail about the online conversations, the meeting, the email. I kept records, saved everything on a flash drive I've carried with me all these years. I was always afraid, always thought maybe someday I'd need proof. That's good. Very good, Thompson said. Detective Amanda Price from Portland will want to speak with you extensively. We'll need to track down this man, make sure he's no longer a threat to you or your family. And then, Rebecca asked, what happens to me? That depends on a lot of factors, Thompson admitted. But Rebecca, your family never stopped looking for you. Your mother moved to Portland just to search. Your brother spent years developing technology to find you. They love you. Whatever legal consequences there might be, they're minor compared to getting you back to your family. Rebecca sank into her chair, overwhelmed. After all this time, will they even want me back? I put them through hell. My mother. Your mother never gave up hope, Thompson interrupted. That tells you everything you need to know about what she wants. Over the next 2 days, Rebecca, she insisted people call her by her real name again, sat for hours of interviews with Detective Price, who had flown in from Portland. She provided the flash drive with her saved emails and documents. She walked them through everything she remembered about the man from the online forum, though the details were frustratingly vague. He'd called himself Marcus Green online, but that was almost certainly not his real name. Price contacted the FBI's Cybercrimes Division. They analyzed the old emails, traced IP addresses, dug through archived server data. What they found was disturbing. Marcus Green had been a prolific predator online, targeting young women involved in activist communities. He'd used the same tactics on dozens of women, building trust, arranging meetings, using fear and blackmail to control them. 2 other women had disappeared under similar circumstances in 2009 and 2011. Their cases had never been connected. Federal agents eventually identified the man behind the Marcus Green identity, Donald Kramer, a former security contractor with a history of harassment charges. He died in a car accident in 2018, which explained why he'd never pursued Rebecca after she disappeared. The realization that she'd been hiding from a dead man for 6 years hit Rebecca hard, though the authorities assured her she'd had no way of knowing. The legal situation was complicated, but ultimately resolved with surprising leniency. Given the circumstances, the documented threats, her age at the time, the trauma involved, prosecutors declined to pursue charges for identity theft or fraud. Rebecca would have to formally reclaim her legal identity, a bureaucratic nightmare that would take months to untangle, but she wouldn't face jail time. The night before she was scheduled to fly back to Portland, Rebecca lay awake in her hotel room, terrified. She'd lived as Emma Hayes longer than she'd been Rebecca Martinez. Emma had a job, an apartment, friends who knew nothing of her past. Rebecca would have to dismantle that life, explain to everyone why she'd lied about who she was. But mostly, she was terrified of seeing her mother's face, of looking into Gloria's eyes and seeing the pain she'd caused, the years stolen by fear and bad decisions. She wasn't sure she deserved forgiveness. She wasn't sure her family would offer it. The flight to Portland felt both endless and far too short. Detective Price accompanied her, both as escort and support. As they descended through clouds into the familiar landscape of the Pacific Northwest, Rebecca felt her chest tighten. She hadn't seen Mount Hood, hadn't smelled the particular dampness of Portland air, hadn't heard the accent patterns of home in 14 years. They'd arranged to meet at the same apartment Gloria had rented all those years ago, still maintained as a base for her search efforts. Price had insisted on a private reunion rather than the media circus that would inevitably follow once word got out. Rebecca was grateful for that small mercy. Daniel met them at the door. Rebecca almost didn't recognize him. He'd been a gangly 15-year-old when she disappeared, and now he stood before her as a grown man, tall and broad-shouldered, with their father's eyes and their mother's determined jaw. For a moment, they just stared at each other. "Danny," Rebecca whispered, using her childhood nickname for him. "Becca," he replied, his voice cracking. Then they were embracing, both crying, holding onto each other as if they might disappear again if they let go. Rebecca felt her brother's shoulders shake with sobs and realized he was taller than her now, stronger. But in that moment, he was just her little brother, the one she'd helped with homework and teased about his crush on the neighbor girl. "I'm so sorry," Rebecca said through her tears. "I'm so sorry." "You're here," Daniel replied. "That's all that matters. You're here." After several minutes, Daniel gently pulled back. "Mum's inside. He paused, struggling for words. "She's been waiting a long time." Rebecca nodded, unable to speak. Price touched her shoulder encouragingly, then stepped back, giving the family space. The door to the apartment opened. Gloria Martinez stood in the doorway, her hair more grey than Rebecca remembered. Her face lined with years of worry and grief. She wore the same perfume she'd always worn, and the scent of it hit Rebecca like a physical blow, transporting her back to her childhood, to Sunday dinners and good-night hugs. "Misha?" Gloria said, her voice barely audible. Rebecca couldn't make her legs work. She stood frozen, taking in every detail of her mother's face, seeing the toll her disappearance had taken. The guilt threatened to crush her. But then Gloria moved, crossing the distance between them with surprising speed for a woman in her 60s. She cupped Rebecca's face in her hands, touching her as if confirming she was real, solid, truly there. "My baby," Gloria whispered. "My beautiful baby girl." "Mom, I'm so sorry," Rebecca began, but Gloria shook her head. No apologies, not today. Today you're home, that's enough." They held each other and wept, 14 years of absence and anguish flowing out in those tears. Daniel joined them, wrapping his arms around both women, and for several long minutes they stood there, a family reunited, healing beginning in the simple act of being together again. Later, sitting around Gloria's small kitchen table with tea and cookies that Rebecca remembered from childhood, she told them everything. She walked them through the fear that had driven her away, the guilt that had kept her away, the daily pain of being separated from them. She apologized over and over until Gloria finally stopped her. "You were protecting us," Gloria said. "You were protecting your father. Is he—" Rebecca couldn't finish the question. "He's still in California," Gloria said. "We're not together anymore, but he never stopped loving you, never stopped hoping you'd come home. He'll want to see you." "I'd like that," Rebecca said softly. "I'd like to see him, to explain." Over the following weeks, the story broke publicly. The media descended with predictable intensity. The long-lost daughter found through cutting-edge technology, the threats that had driven her into hiding, the mother who never gave up searching, the brother whose love and determination had brought her home. It was a story made for headlines, for television specials, for viral social media posts. Rebecca struggled with the attention. For 14 years, she'd lived in anonymity, and suddenly she was recognized everywhere. But she endured it, gave interviews alongside her family, because she understood that their story might help others. How many other people were hiding, living under false names, separated from loved ones by fear or trauma? How many families were still searching, hoping against hope for a miracle? The reunion with her father came 3 weeks after Portland. Antonio Martinez had aged visibly, his hair completely white now, his movements slower than Rebecca remembered. But when he saw her, years seemed to fall away. He embraced her with the same strength she remembered from childhood, lifting her off her feet despite his 68 years. "Mi corazón," he whispered, using his pet name for her. "My heart." They talked for hours, Rebecca explaining everything, Antonio listening with tears streaming down his weathered face. He told her about the years after her disappearance, how it had nearly destroyed him, how he'd never forgiven himself for coming to this country illegally, certain that his status was somehow responsible for what happened to her. "It wasn't your fault," Rebecca insisted. "None of it was your fault. You came here for a better life, for opportunities. That man used your situation as a weapon against me, but that doesn't make you responsible." Antonio's immigration status, they learned, had actually been resolved years earlier. Changes in immigration law and his decades-long presence in the country had eventually led to a path to legal residency. The threat that had seemed so enormous, so insurmountable to 20-year-old Rebecca, had ultimately been neutralized by time and legislation. Had she known, had she stayed just a few more years, everything might have been different. But dwelling on what-ifs would only drive them crazy. Instead, they focused on rebuilding. Rebecca underwent months of therapy, processing the trauma of her original stalking and the subsequent years of self-imposed exile. She worked with federal prosecutors, building cases against others in Donald Kramer's network, helping to identify other potential victims. The legal process of reclaiming her identity proved exhausting. 14 years of credit history, employment records, and personal relationships had all been built under Emma Hayes. Transitioning back to Rebecca Martinez meant explaining to everyone in Austin, her employer, her friends, her landlord, why she'd lied about who she was. Some people understood and forgave. Others felt betrayed and walked away. It hurt, but Rebecca understood. Trust, once broken, wasn't easily repaired. Daniel helped her navigate the practical challenges. Together, they untangled the bureaucratic knots, filed the necessary paperwork, contacted the Social Security Administration, and worked with Texas officials to properly document her return to her legal identity. It took nearly a year, but eventually, Emma Hayes ceased to exist legally, and Rebecca Martinez was officially alive again. The question of where to live proved surprisingly complicated. Austin had been her home for 14 years. She had a job she enjoyed, an apartment she'd made her own, a favorite coffee shop where the barista knew her order. But Portland held her family, her history, the life she'd abandoned. For months, she felt torn between two worlds, belonging fully to neither. Eventually, she found a compromise. She kept her job in Austin, but arranged to work remotely several months of the year from Portland, where she rented a small apartment near her mother. It wasn't perfect, but it allowed her to maintain the life she'd built while reconnecting with the family she'd lost. The relationship with Gloria deepened in ways Rebecca hadn't anticipated. They were no longer just mother and daughter, but two women who'd both survived trauma, who'd both lost years they couldn't get back. They talked honestly about the pain of those missing years, the anger and grief Gloria had carried, the guilt and shame Rebecca still struggled with. It wasn't always easy. Sometimes their conversations ended in arguments or tears, but they worked through it, committed to rebuilding their relationship on a foundation of honesty rather than idealized memories. Daniel, meanwhile, continued developing his facial recognition technology, but with a new focus. He founded a non-profit organization dedicated to helping families find missing persons, using the same techniques that had found his sister to assist others still searching for loved ones. He called it the Rebecca Project, and though she was initially uncomfortable with having it named after her, she eventually embraced the mission. The organization helped reunite 17 families in its first 2 years of operation. Some cases were like Rebecca's, people who'd run away or disappeared voluntarily but stayed in touch with the digital world through jobs, social media, or public cameras. Others were tragic discoveries, identifying bodies that had gone unnamed for years. But each case represented closure for a family, an end to the particular torture of not knowing, and that felt meaningful. Rebecca sometimes worked with the organization, sharing her story with other families, offering hope to those still searching. It was difficult, reopening her wounds to help others heal theirs, but she felt a responsibility. She'd been given a second chance that many didn't get. The least she could do was use her experience to help others. 3 years after her return, on what would have been the 17th anniversary of her disappearance, Rebecca stood on the Reed College campus for the first time since that October night in 2010. The campus had changed. New buildings, different landscaping, students who weren't even born when she'd walked these paths. But the essence remained the same, the intellectual energy, the earnest conversations about changing the world. She walked to the spot where she'd last been seen, outside the coffee shop where she'd told her friends she needed to make a phone call. A small memorial plaque had been placed there years ago, part of a campus awareness campaign about personal safety. It still bore her name, still marked her as missing. She'd need to contact the school about updating it. Jennifer Kim, her former roommate, had agreed to meet her there. They'd reconnected cautiously over email, Jennifer initially wary, hurt that Rebecca had never reached out, even after she'd been found. But gradually, they'd rebuilt their friendship, and when Rebecca said she wanted to visit campus, Jennifer had offered to accompany her. "It's surreal being back here," Rebecca said, as Jennifer approached. "I can't imagine," Jennifer replied. They embraced carefully, still finding their way back to the easy affection they'd once shared. "Does it feel like coming home?" Rebecca considered the question. "No, I don't think this place can be home again. Too much has changed. Me, mostly. But it doesn't feel like the haunted place I thought it would either. It's just a college campus where I used to be a student." They walked together, talking about mutual friends, catching up on the lives that had continued without Rebecca. Many of their classmates had scattered across the country, building careers, starting families, living the normal adult lives that Rebecca had missed years of while hiding in plain sight. "Do you regret it?" Jennifer asked suddenly. "Running?" Rebecca took a long time to answer. "I regret the pain I caused. I regret the years my family spent searching, the grief I put them through. But do I regret trying to protect them? No. I was 20 years old and terrified, making decisions with the information and maturity I had at the time. I can't punish myself forever for the choices that scared girl made." "That's very mature of you," Jennifer noted. Rebecca laughed. "I've had a lot of therapy." As they walked, Rebecca found herself thinking about all the versions of herself that had existed over the past 17 years. There was the girl she'd been before the stalking, naive and idealistic. The terrified young woman who'd run. The Emma Hayes she'd constructed, a persona built from fear and necessity. And now, this new Rebecca, trying to integrate all those identities into something whole and authentic. She'd never be that 20-year-old again. Too much had happened, too many years had passed, but maybe that was okay. Maybe the point wasn't to reclaim who she'd been, but to accept who she'd become, someone who'd survived, who'd protected the people she loved in the only way she knew how, who'd built a life from nothing and then had the courage to reclaim her name. That evening, back at Gloria's apartment, the family gathered for dinner. Rebecca, Gloria, Daniel, and even Antonio, who'd driven up from California. They sat around the same table where they'd shared that first reunion, but the atmosphere was different now, less fragile, more comfortable. They'd worked through the worst of the pain and were beginning to simply enjoy being together again. As they ate, they swapped stories and memories, filling in the gaps of missing years. Antonio told stories from Rebecca's childhood that she'd forgotten. Daniel shared memories of the sister he'd idolized and missed desperately. Gloria talked about the small moments that had sustained her during the search, a song that reminded her of Rebecca, a stranger's smile that looked like her daughter's, the unwavering belief that somehow, someday, she'd find her way home. "Can I say something?" Rebecca asked when there was a lull in conversation. Everyone turned to her expectantly. "I know I've said this before, but I need to say it again. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for leaving, for staying away, for all the pain I caused. I was young and scared and made terrible choices. If I could go back and do things differently, I would in a heartbeat." Gloria reached across the table and took her hand. "Mija, we've forgiven you. Now you need to forgive yourself." "I'm working on it," Rebecca admitted. "That's all any of us can do," Antonio said. "Work on it, day by day." Daniel raised his glass. "To working on it, and to second chances." They all raised their glasses, toasting the unlikely miracle that had brought them back together. As Rebecca looked around the table at the faces of the people she loved, she felt something she hadn't felt in 14 years. Whole. Not healed. Healing would take much longer, but whole. The missing piece had been restored, the family reunited, the story no longer frozen in tragedy, but continuing forward into whatever future they could build together. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be difficult days, moments when the past rose up to haunt them, times when the weight of lost years seemed unbearable. But they would face it together, no longer separated by fear and distance, no longer searching for someone who was lost. Rebecca Martinez had disappeared in 2010, but in 2024 she'd been found. Not just located through technology or detective work, but truly found, restored to herself, to her name, to her family. It wasn't the ending anyone had expected, but it was an ending nonetheless, and more importantly, it was a beginning. Outside the apartment window, Portland's lights twinkled in the evening darkness, the city going about its business, unaware of the quiet miracle happening in one small apartment where a family had been made whole again. And in that moment, gathered around a simple dinner table, Rebecca finally understood what her mother had known all along. That love doesn't give up, that families endure, and that even when all hope seems lost, sometimes, miraculously, the lost find their way home.